Imagine an empire that loses two-thirds of its territory, watches its cities crumble into fortresses, and produces almost no literature for a century. Yet historians call this period the foundation of its greatest revival. This is 9th century Byzantium, and its story challenges everything we think about civilizational decline. Look at this transformation. In 550, Justinian ruled a Mediterranean empire spanning Italy, North Africa, and the Near East. By the 800s, Byzantium had shrunk to Anatolia, Constantinople, and the fragments of the Balkans. Egypt fell in 642, Syria fell in 636. The Islamic conquest severed the empire's breadbasket, its theological diversity, and its multilingual character in a single generation. Justinian, who died in 565, was the last Latin-speaking emperor. After him, Greek dominated. This linguistic shift reflected a demographic reality. The empire had lost its Latin-speaking western territories and its Syriac and Coptic-speaking eastern provinces. What remained was a Greek-speaking Orthodox Christian core, and the transformation wasn't just territorial, it was cultural, linguistic, and religious. See, Orthodox Christianity occupied a specific theological position. The ancient church had split over Christ's nature. Nestorianism emphasized Christ's humanity. Monophysitism emphasized his divinity. Orthodoxy held the middle ground, affirming both natures united in one person. The 9th century Byzantine Church remained formally unified with Rome. The East-West Schism wouldn't occur until 1054. They were one church, growing apart. What did this transformed empire look like? Constantinople stood alone as a true city. Every other urban center had become a castron, a fortress city focused on defense rather than commerce. Forums stood empty. Theaters fell silent. Bathhouses crumbled. The classical urban civilization that Rome had spread across the Mediterranean finally ended, not in 476 with Rome's fall, but here in the 8th and 9th centuries. The 9th century Byzantine world was rural, militarized, and intensely religious. Trade networks had contracted. Libraries existed but gathered dust. Scholars copied old texts but produced almost nothing new. Secular literature vanished. The Greco-Roman pagan intellectual tradition, which had survived Christianity's triumph, finally ended. This was a society in survival mode, focused entirely on defense and salvation. This looks like collapse. Shrinking borders, crumbling cities, intellectual silence. By every conventional measure, Byzantine civilization was dying. But conventional measures missed something crucial. The old empire had been diverse, multilingual, theologically fractured. Defending it meant defending everything, everywhere. The new empire was homogeneous, Greek-speaking, Orthodox, defensible. Byzantium hadn't collapsed, it had contracted to its survivable core. Think of a tree pruned back to its roots, the branches are gone, the canopy has vanished. To an observer, the tree appears dead, but the root system remains intact, drawing nutrients, waiting. Byzantium shed what it couldn't defend: Latin territories, diverse populations, theological disputes. What remained was concentrated, unified, and resilient. Sometimes civilizations survive by becoming smaller. Compare Byzantium's fate to Western Rome. Rome fragmented into successor kingdoms. Goths, Franks, Lombards carved up the carcass. No single power consolidated the remains. Byzantium took the opposite path, radical consolidation rather than fragmentation, one language, one faith, one defensible territory centered on Anatolia's highlands and Constantinople's walls. The empire that survived was smaller but coherent. This diminished, fortress-bound, intellectually quiet society would generate the Byzantine Renaissance. Within 2 centuries, Constantinople would again become the wealthiest city in Christendom. Byzantine armies would reconquer territory. Byzantine scholars would preserve and transmit Greek learning to the Islamic world and eventually to Western Europe. The 9th century's apparent decline was actually preparation for revival. 9th century Byzantium teaches a counterintuitive lesson about resilience. Sometimes the path to survival runs through diminishment, and contraction enables endurance.